There is a pulse after all. Kansas State finally makes some noise in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and thank you once again. We are getting very close to 800 subscribers, so if you haven't already, click that subscribe button because we are just coasting on through. We have plenty of news to talk about on today's show. We're going to dive right into some men's basketball talk today, diving into those portal additions and departures on the men's basketball team and all that's left to do for this program as they head into the offseason. Before we do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Abdi Bashir Jr. from Monmouth is committed to Kansas State, transfers in from the Colonial, I think it's now actually the Coastal Athletic Association, used to be called the Colonial, and they shifted that just a few years ago. Sophomore, heading into this year, he was a sophomore, 6'7", 160 pounds. So tall, lanky kind of player. But the big thing here is that he is a shooter. And that is something that Kansas State absolutely needs. And Bashir brings that to the program for sure. He was tied for 15th in the country with 20.1 points per game. And the biggest thing here is most of those came from the 3-point. He led the entire country in 3 points made, and it wasn't even close. I mean, the amount of 3-pointers he shot was absolutely incredible, and shot 38% from the 3-point line, but the numbers is insane to me. And this is what really drove me, really right off the bat, just my eyes were glued. He shot 127 for 332 from the 3-point line, made 127 makes from beyond the arc in the 24-25 season for Monmouth. Obviously, that's good for a 38.3% 3-point shooting. That would have made him right there with Brendan Hausen, who we're going to talk about on this show, if he was a part of Kansas State's roster this past season. 127 of his 222 made shots from the field came from behind the arc. So this guy's not afraid to let it rip from 30 feet and beyond. Pretty exciting there. And he can shoot. Now, 6'7", you think he gets some more rebounds and some assists. He is a 6'7" guard. Looks like he's going to probably play in the 2 spot, but not really much there. That's something that is left to be desired, if you will. Not too many rebounds. Averages only about 2 rebounds per game, 2.6 to be exact, and averages 2.2 assists per game. Field goal shooting from the field is just a little bit lower than his 3-point shooting, 37.7%. You'd hope those numbers maybe bump up heading into Big 12 play. And while we're just talking about maybe some of the negatives here, his defense is, lack of better word, but honestly might be the right word, atrocious. One of the worst defensive efficiency players in the country. So one of the best 3-point shooters in the country, the best in the eyes of 3-point makes, but on the flip side, terrible when it comes to defensive side of the ball. And that was in a mid-major conference. What does that mean for the Big 12? And we're talking about playing teams like Houston, who are known for their defense, who made it all the way to the national championship, who, for the record, I think were screwed by the refs in that national championship game last night. But who am I, right? Who am I to say that? Regardless, when I'm looking at this, I think obviously defense is a problem, but if there's any coach that can work on something with a game, that's Coach Tang and his defense. He probably is be able to coach him up, maybe not to be like the most elite defender on the team, but definitely get him out of the basement in the country. And that's huge. And you definitely need something like that. Obviously, the 3-point shot is fantastic, but another plus side of his game, get to flip back to the good sides here, is his free throw shooting. 86.8% from the free throw line this past season. Got to the free throw line on average at least twice per game, averaged 2.8 free throws per game. So meaning he had to get there at least twice. So that's awesome. That's great because Kansas State had a lot of struggles when it came from the charity strike this year. And to put it lightly, it was frustrating, super frustrating watching this team shoot free throws. So bringing that in as potentially your starting number two, playing the two, if you will, is great from the free throw line. Having someone you can rely on is great. I'm assuming that the idea right now, based on who we've seen leave for the portal, and we're going to dive into that in the next segment here, and who they brought in. And right now it's just him, Abdi Bashir Jr. 6'7" again. It's really exciting. I'm assuming it's going to be him, Doug McDaniel, and him being the guards. Now, he's not much of a facilitator, as we mentioned, 2.2 assists per game. And if you look at we talk about defensive efficiency, if you look at some of his offensive efficiency stats, for example, his assist to turnover ratio is negative, and you don't want that as well. So I think we're going to see more of Doug McDaniel be the facilitator on the team, and obviously he can score, but taking that maybe a little bit of that scoring out of his hands and pushing it to Bashir, making him just the overall shooter. I think that's a big deal. I think that's huge. And I think that can help Kansas State hopefully take another step forward with this new idea that they have with building the Houston model, right? And we talk about this Houston model. We've talked about it for quite some time on this show. And I think it even gains a little bit more weight now that we've seen them go all the way to the national championship. But Bashir has 2 years left of eligibility. You want to hope that you can get him for not just this season, but next year as well, building that core, if you will. And I think that's going to be a pattern that we see. And we're going to talk about that as we finish up this show, what's next for Kansas State and where they should look. But just my thought process based on what we are hearing from over the past months, if you will, from Coach Tang and his coaching staff and what he said in press conferences, that he wants to build an established Houston model, if you will, meaning that he wants to get retention with players and basically let them get old with Kansas State, grow, and not just leave in the portal. Now, obviously, that's going to be a tough task to do with NIL and this transfer portal. That's kind of taking, if you will, the old school approach, right? That's the old school approach these days. But it seems to be consistent and successful, especially in this conference in the Big 12. If you look at some of the most successful teams right now, with Houston leading the way, obviously going all the way to the national championship and losing by just a crazy ending, by the way, in that Houston game. Insane. Bashir's brother was in JUCO, and he actually just committed to Auburn. And spoke with Locked On Auburn's Zach Blackerby just a little bit ago before I was recording the show. And he said that Auburn was actually looking into him as well. So there was plenty of other high-end programs that Bashir was being looked at. Michigan was one. Kentucky was one as well. But he decides to go with the other Wildcats. Come to Little Apple, come to Manhattan, and he's going to play for Kansas State. I like the pickup. I think it's not a perfect piece, but when you haven't made the NCAA tournament in 2 years, I don't think you're going to get top 10 portal additions. According to 24/7, he was the 48th prospect in the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings. 48, top 50. I mean, I think you got to take that as a win right now. I think you have to take that kind of addition as a win. You haven't made the tournament in 2 years. You have kind of this bad rep right now of spending this money in NIL this past season, and you don't make anything of it. You kind of have to build your reputation back. And I think that's just the world we live in right now, heading into this new portal. And I think we're going to start seeing some more traction very soon. And hopefully we see that change. But as of right now, I think getting Bashir is a big win. And I think we need to take it just as that. We get some traction finally. We get a pulse. That's also a huge win as well. Final note here, just one more concern. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future as we dive more in, and maybe it won't be a concern at all. But when I'm looking at his stats and numbers, and if I haven't seen him play at all, I've seen just a few highlights. I'll be completely honest. I watched just a few highlights before I dived in here. read a couple articles about him, and then dived in and started talking about him. Really, I'm talking to you based on the box scores, based on the stats. And speaking of more of the stuff on paper, 6'7", 160. I don't know how that's going to work in the Big 12. I'm assuming he's going to probably have to put on a little bit of weight, a little bit of size, if you will, and hopefully that can help him maybe be more impactful inside that three-point land. Maybe that's why he shoots so many from the outside, because he is just 160 pounds. Now, that size and that type of body works, right? If I'm thinking just right off the bat, and I'm not comparing him to this player whatsoever, but if I'm thinking very tall, lanky type of players, the first person that comes to my mind, NBA superstar Kevin Durant, right? That's kind of I guess the top shelf of what I'm thinking of that type of body build. But I do think he's going to have to add some size, and we'll see if that happens this offseason heading into the new year, and see if that changes his game a little bit. But he's obviously going to be a three-point shooter, a three-point specialist. That's something you absolutely need, because just a few minutes, really maybe like an hour before the news of Bashir committing to Kansas State, we heard some other news about a couple players leaving the program, and we're going to dive into that. And another one that happened just a couple days before we haven't had a chance to talk to. We'll dive into that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Well, there is nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching up on a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, well, that used to be a challenge until I found Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer. And with the all-in-one pricing, you can see your total cost up front. No surprises, even at checkout. That is my favorite part. Absolutely, 100%. Last-minute deals are also really cool as well. You can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, if you will, anything, you name it. I had the opportunity to check out some last-minute tickets. I'm out on the West Coast. Checked out some last-minute tickets for the Seattle Mariners just a few days ago. And let me tell you, at Game Time, I know that I saved quite a bit. Can't say I saved on parking, though. The parking down here is absolutely atrocious. But the peace of mind when you get to see your seat view before buying the tickets, no surprise fees, and the lowest price guaranteed is absolutely awesome, and you can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, that is code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're very close to 800 subscribers. I thank you so much. If you have ideas, I'd love to get some mailbag episodes going. So if you have some ideas, hit me up in the comment description below of any of the episodes. Use hashtag mailbag, or just say mailbag question, or hit me up on Twitter X at Locked On K-State. I'd love to get that going, especially as we start entering this period of off season, right? No basketball, no football. So I'd love to get your takes on there. So if you have a question you want me to answer, or just maybe a thought process or something like that, hit me up and we'll address it on the show and have a conversation about it for sure. Would love to have that happen. So again, on Twitter X at Locked On K-State. And then of course you can hit me up in any of these comments as well. I will see that and I'll get back to you. So I appreciate that. We're diving into a new portal edition on the transfer portal, finally making some moves. Monmouth guard Abdi Bashir Jr., one of the top shooters and scorers in the transfer portal, is now a Kansas State Wildcat. Pretty exciting. We dived into that in that last segment. Now I think we have to dive into what is some bittersweet news. And really, did we actually get better on Monday with the addition of Abdi Bashir? And the reason I say that is because we bring in an elite three-point shooter, but we say goodbye to an elite three-point shooter that we had just this past season. And I will say that this absolutely stung. I did not see this one coming, and it stung. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room that feels about this one. The assassin, the Amarillo Assassin, if you will, Armadillo Assassin, whatever one you want to go with. But Brendan Hausen has elected to head into the transfer portal. And this news happened just about maybe an hour, 2 hours before we heard about the Rashir news, excuse me. And It stung. Now I will say that the sting changed a little bit once we got the commitment of another excellent 3-point shooter, and maybe that's the reason why he hit the portal as well. Probably with some news dropping, I'm guessing that's maybe the reason why. But also a 38% 3-point shooter. He only averaged 10.9 points per game as well. And Hausen was great, and it was awesome having him on the team. I look forward to seeing where he goes. His brother plays for High Point. I don't know if his brother has entered the portal or if he intends to, but I think it'd be kind of cool if they found a way to work and get back together and play. I think that'd be pretty neat. We'll see what happens with his decision. But obviously, Hausen came over in the portal as well, playing with Villanova for 2 seasons before heading over to Kansas State. Maybe he's planning on hitting back to the Big East with this new with these new rulings, with the moving to like the 105 for college football and the NIL and the rev sharing, which for the record, it did not get a final hearing. Well, I guess a conclusion on the final hearing on Monday. They are giving a week to the NCAA to give some changes. But when we were talking about that in the past couple episodes, we mentioned how some mid-major conferences like the Big East are going to have an advantage to spend more money because they don't have to worry about football. So maybe he heads back to the Big East. Maybe we'll see that happen in the near future. But Hausen, just like we just got with our new portal edition here, was a great 3-point shooter, but struggled defensively. But his defense drastically improved over the year with being under Jerome Tang. So that gives me a lot of good feelings about that changing for the new players coming in. But obviously, it would have been nice having Hausen on the team. 39% 3-point shooter, if you will, 38.8. So just a little bit better than what we're getting in, but obviously didn't make as many. Made 90, still really good, but didn't make as many. What I say, 122 or something like that, 127. I closed that tab. But what we are getting is just absolutely incredible from Abdi Bashir Jr. out of Monmouth. We'll see if he can make a step up in the Big 12 play. Obviously, Hausen knew how to do that from the Big East and the Big 12. So that'll be the biggest question. And that's why I ask, do we actually get better on Monday? Or is it a lateral change? Or did we still have a lot of work to do? Well, I think that is still the case. I think we still have a lot of work to do. No doubt about that, for sure. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about this. This is the first time we're talking about portal for the men's basketball team since last week. And before that happened, we didn't have anyone leave the portal, but we now have 2. And this one was expected, other than Hausen, which one stung. And I think this one still stings too, but I think it's a little lighter because I kind of expected this one. And I think and really any Kansas State fan that watched basketball this season and paid attention to the storylines probably felt this one was happening too. Macaleb Buddy Rich enters the portal, sophomore 6'7" out of East St. Louis. There was something happening. We don't know. Maybe we'll find out down the road. Maybe he'll have to wait till he commits and somebody talks about his past experiences. Maybe we'll hear it at media days down the road. I don't know if we're ever going to hear the story about what happened with Macaleb Buddy Rich, but I can tell you that, just to close this out one more time, that he was getting some good playing time earlier in the season. Then he stopped getting playing time, and when media members asked Jerome Tang at press conference, he refused to answer it. He just said he wasn't going to answer it. Now, it could be one of 2 things. It could have been the fact that there was an off the court issue. And I think it could be a little bit of both, for the record. Could have been an off the court issue, and it could have been easily addressed. But this was also the same time that Jerome Tang was trying to get the buy-in in the locker room. So he wasn't trying to throw a player under the bus. He was trying to maybe show that he was a player's coach and get all the buy-in he possibly could to change that culture of that locker room, doing something maybe as small as that or as big. We don't know what kind of, immense impact it was, could have impact or hurt that type of effort that Coach Tang and his coaching staff were putting in. So I'm guessing it was a little bit of both there, but again, we don't know. And until somebody who's close to him or him brings that up, then that's when we'll find out. But overall, losing Hausen, losing Macaleb Buddy Rich, got some holes to fill. And then, of course, losing David Gasson and losing Coleman Hawkins, it's huge. So you're walking away with at least 4 players not being on the team anymore, We still worrying about a waiver for Jones. We'll see if that happens. That seems unlikely. And then, there's just a lot of things down the pipeline about what is next for this Kansas State basketball team roster. You've missed out on a couple key transfers. We're going to talk about that next. And then we're going to talk about what should be the next move for Coach Tang and his coaching staff. I think you have an idea of what your 1 and your 2 look like, your guards with Doug McDaniel and now with Rasheer. But what does that mean for the rest of the starting lineup, let alone just your bench? We need to talk about that next as we close up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. Welcome back. Locked On Kansas State. Christian Rauh here, your host every single day. No one brings Kansas State Wildcats coverage like we do every single day. So thank you so much for making this show your first listen. We're talking portal, all portal on this conversation. Abdi Bashir Jr. from Monmouth coming in, losing Brendan Hausen, losing Macaleb Buddy Rich. So that's where we sit right now. We got 2 out, 1 in the eyes of the portal, right, with eligibility. We obviously know that there were some players that just weren't coming back, and there was nothing we could do about that. Coleman Hawkins and David Gasson. Would love to have them back, but that's just how this rolls. In case we forgot, with the feeling of it felt like there's just eligibility for decades, they finally did run out of eligibility. No more David Gasson and no more Coleman Hawkins. We almost did have a reunion, though, at least in the eyes of some intel coming in, that we almost had an interesting reunion. It would have been really interesting, but it did not come to fruition. Nigel Pack did commit. Former Kansas State Wildcat, went to Miami. He did commit to the Oklahoma Sooners. There was talk that we were down to his final 4 for returning. Don't know how serious that was. I think he's looking for a medical red shirt, or he did receive a medical red shirt, getting a waiver, and is going to be playing in the SEC for what will most likely be his final season of college basketball. Would have been kind of cool to see that, but I'm guessing with Rasheer coming in and hopefully Doug McDaniel sticking around, would have been nice to have a third guard on the roster, but I think that there are some other priorities that need to happen, most certainly. And I think the one that I'm most disappointed at for transfers that we missed out on is Omaha transfer forward Markel Sutton. He committed and went to the SEC as well. He's going to LSU. We're losing some battles to LSU over the last couple of years. And obviously, if you want to call it a battle, obviously missing out on some players, and Carter going to LSU last season. And of course, now Sutton, who was the Summit League Player of the Year, will head to the Tigers. So what does that mean now? Well, as I mentioned, you lost Hausen, and then you bring in Rasheer. Let's just call that a lateral move for now. I think you still enter this week, even after Monday, with the addition and subtractions. I think you enter with the exact same priorities that you had really since the season ended. I think you still have to find a way to fill the holes of David Gasson and Coleman Hawkins. Those are still your priorities. With Hausen leaving, yes, it hurts. I think more as a fan standpoint than actually on the roster because of bringing in Abdi Bashir. So the priority still remains the same. You got to find a way to take care of the forwards and take care of your bigs. You don't have that right now. We're still waiting on if we're going to see some changes with Moby, or if anything happens with Ugana Onyesio. We don't know if that's going to happen, if maybe they enter the portal. But if they do, or if they don't, I still think you need to make some sort of priority there with the bigs. The only thing I'm seeing right now with any sort of traction on the bigs, and I think On3 posted this, was Nick Pringle from South Carolina. And Wildcats did chase him hard last cycle, and they missed out of him, but they need some help in the front court. Kansas State needs a lot of help in the front court. And I think even with the depth that they have at the moment, assuming that no one else leaves in the portal, I still think you got to make at least one addition with your 4 and your 5. I think if you walk into the season as you are right now with the big men that you have on the roster, I think you're in big trouble. And I think we've kind of already seen that some of the production that we are hoping for is either in the developmental stages. Like I think Moby is going to have an opportunity to take a big step forward this next season. I'm looking forward to that. Or just hasn't panned out as what you've expected. And I think maybe you can say that with Ugani and Yesio. We'll see what happens moving forward. I still think there's much to do, though. We'll see what happens in the international market as well. It could be the next move. That's what I'm paying attention to. Hopefully we see some international moves because there are some players that have had our eyes on. Matthew Gurchuk for one of them, that not only could be a star on Kansas State, but could potentially be a player that we haven't had for a very long time with NBA aspirations. Haven't had that for quite really a couple seasons now. So that would be really cool to have that. And of course would make a big step forward in the Big 12 and beyond. The goal's got to make the tournament. You got to make the tournament next season. And right now, as we sit today on April 8th, after making just a few additions in the portal, and there's obviously going to be more, but as of today, this is not a tournament team. It's not. Because right now we are worse than we were last season. We still have a lot of work to do, and we got to make that happen. Final note here as we head out for the day. Jerome Tang had some comments on a podcast before, I believe it was before the Final Four or it was before the national championship game, one of the two, but it was just in the last week or so. And it was on the podcast, I believe the Field of 68 podcast. And he said, quote, a high NIL last year is a low NIL this year. And that's obviously a direct look at his team with Kansas State, because last year they had one of the highest NILs, paying Coleman Hawkins $2 million to come and play. I mean, that was a headline. He was one of the highest paid players in all of the country coming to Kansas State for just one season. Now we're hearing things about Duke after losing in the Final Four. They're having, quote, an unlimited war chest to spend $8 to $10 million on their roster to build back up. And with Duke, they have a whole different world, right? They are all 4 one and done players. They want to get the best and just absolutely build up. We're seeing that with Cooper Flagg. We're seeing that with other players who are going to be going probably in the top 10 in the draft. I think I saw the latest NBA mock draft for Duke, and it was like 3 players in the top 12 going in the NBA draft. So Duke's obviously going to have to spend some money if they want to get back to that Final Four, but they're willing to do it. I don't think Kansas State's going to be able to get to that $8 to $10 million mark. For the record, I don't think they have to, but the $2 million mark of where they were at last year and what we hear on message boards and social media about people getting so upset about all the money that this program has spent, whether it's your money or not, for the record, but still having that feeling is truly going to be a low number. And we'll see if that changes for Kansas State. If it does, great. And I'm sure the expectations will be even higher, which I'm sure will bring fun conversations across social media over the next year. But if it doesn't, then be prepared to possibly have another rough season, because that's the world we're living in right now with college athletics. It's a pay-to-play kind of world. That's why we're seeing players at the portal, players who aren't committing to Kansas State, who was just in the Elite Eight just a few years ago. They don't care about that. What they see right now is, what can you pay me? NIL opportunities. And if you want to go on a performance level, Kansas State's not looking too hot right now there, because they haven't made the tournament in 2 years. Recency bias is absolutely a thing, folks, especially when it comes to college kids who just play the game. They're probably not worrying about the history of the program, unless you're talking about in college basketball, the select few of those blue bloods, right? It's just the way it is. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but obviously a lot to talk about in the coming days. We got more college football to talk about. We got to talk about the women's portal, because there's been a lot of moves there. We saw some loyalty moves, and we saw some surprising moves as well on the women's side. We still have to get to that. We'll do that this week, and so much more. So thank you for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen. For your second listen today, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players. Get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. So find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.